American 2039 will just be about 30 seconds away.
Really? Come on, this is a commercial airport, not a touch-and-go field.
How's that for a pilot temper tantrum? Here's the full audio.
Tower American at 2139, holding square 36. We'll be ready to go when you can get that.
American 2039. F4 from you, following a skyline about a mile ahead to your left. Looking for that traffic.
Tower American 2139. Just be advised, we're about 2 minutes away from having to go back to the gate for fuel.
American 2139, Mass Tower, Roger, runway 36, line.
Runway 36, American 2139.
American 2039 will just be about 30 seconds away.
Really? Come on, this is a commercial airport, not a touch-and-go field.
American 2139, you could have told Mason about 10 minutes ago, right? We got 4 in the pattern, it happened 5 minutes ago. Now you tell me 1 minute ago you have 2 minutes before your timeout. Unacceptable. Touch and go's going to last 20 more seconds and then you can go.
Yeah, don't get like me. We didn't know that 2 minutes ago. This is a commercial airport.
American 21, fly runway heading 10810, runway 36, clear for takeoff.
Runway heading, clear for takeoff, American 2139.
Now, if you're like me, you're thinking, wow, this is a big airport and they have 4 different planes doing pattern work in there. I thought, wow, that seems kind of crazy. So I had to look it up and it said the airport code was MSN. Never heard of it? Me neither. This is MSN Airport, the big airport the pilot was referring to. It is Dane County Regional Airport. Yeah, sounds massive. If you're wondering where that is, that's in Madison, Wisconsin, which, in fairness to Madison, is the capital, but it's kind of like saying Albany, New York is the capital of New York. It has a population of roughly 300,000 people. We're not talking about a major, huge airport with a ton of traffic going through it. And that's why these pilots are there doing some of their flight training. Back in the day, I used to fly to Wisconsin a lot, and they are some of the nicest people you will ever meet. And that is probably why the pilot, you heard them replying to air traffic control on the radio, is being polite and friendly and not saying what they probably were thinking about saying. But don't worry, I have you covered. First, let's talk about what this American pilot was saying about their fuel situation.
Tower American 2139. Just be advised, we're about 2 minutes away from having to go back to the gate for fuel.
If you have a sharp eye, you may have noticed in some of my vlogs there will be a point where I have 2 different fuel scores on there. One of those fuel scores is how much it's recommended for us to push back from the blocks or push back from the gate or leave the parking area, basically. That's a recommendation. However, there's a second fuel score that I write down, and I do this at the hotel before I even get to the plane, but this second fuel that is a fuel that we need to have legally in order to take off. You can't legally take off without that fuel. That fuel is what allows you to get to your destination, and then if you can't get to that destination, to get to the backup destination, and then be able to hold at that destination. All that stuff is the legalities of being a pilot. So the first fuel score is like a recommendation. The second fuel score is a mandatory number that you have to hit, and that's why this pilot is saying this.
Tower American 2139. Just be advised, we're about 2 minutes away from having to go back to the gate for fuel.
So on the flight release, it looks something like this. This block number here is the recommendation, and you can see it's more than what we actually need for actual takeoff, which is this min fuel number here, 46.4. So that fuel is what you need to safely get to your destination, get to your alternate, hold, do all the stuff. Now, could you wait an extra minute or 2 and safely go? Yeah, of course, you'd probably be fine. You typically land with plenty of extra gas. However, they don't want you as a pilot to be making those decisions. That fuel that they give you is the legal requirements, and so they want to set a boundary, a foundation. Hey, don't leave without this amount of gas, and that just gives you a backup there. So that fuel and having the right amount of fuel is important. However, you have to, as a pilot, make some planning as far as, hey, we're going to taxi you over here. You might be in JFK. You might take an extra couple tons of gas. Well, I mean, on my plane, you might take an extra couple tons of gas because you may be sitting there and waiting for a while. You might taxi out on just one engine, or if you have a 2-engine plane like these pilots do. You might taxi out on just one engine, so that way you're not burning extra gas. Those are things that I used to do when I was flying a regional jet. We would taxi out on one engine if there was a long wait. That way we were not burning fuel, just sitting there not moving. So these are all kind of things that you have to plan as a pilot, looking ahead to figure out what the situation is going to be. Now, in this major airport that this pilot is at, you can imagine it's going to be a relatively short taxi, but you still need to factor for the time that's going to take you to taxi there and wait a couple of minutes. You're not going to go, if 46.4 is your minimum fuel that you're required to have, you're not going to block out of the gates with 46.8 because that may not be enough for you to safely taxi over there, and you're not going to want to have to go back to the gate. So to calm their concerns, the controller put them into position on the runway to be ready to go as soon as the other plane was out of the way. And then he says this.
Maybe 2039 with the speed about 30 seconds away.
Which is when this pilot started their temper tantrum. Now, the reality is that this pilot doesn't care about the airport or anything like that. If they were saying what they really wanted to say, it is, my time is more important and what I want to do is more important than anybody else. That's what they really wanted to say. But what they wanted to do was blame it on the size of the airport, which is dumb. Just say what you're really thinking. I'm more important and I want to get to my layover, or I want to go home, or I want to go do what I want to do. I don't care about everybody else. This is my sandbox and I want to play in it and do it the way I want to do it. That's what he's really saying here. He just disguised it by saying it like this.
Really? Come on, this is a commercial airport, not a touch-and-go field.
The thing is that this pilot that is saying this is saying it on tower frequency, which is the frequency that all these other pilots are listening to that are doing pattern work. And pattern work is something that you do in flight school. You fly around in this racetrack pattern, and that's where you do your practicing your takeoff, practicing your landing, practice your go-arounds if the landing isn't looking good, which in my case was a lot of my landings. But you're going to be doing this and you're going to be talking with the tower and you're going to be hearing about all the other planes that are taking off and landing, and that controller is going to be taking care of you. That is pattern work. So there's 4 planes that are doing that pattern work. They're practicing those landings. This controller is handling them and this American flight that is getting ready to go. So you have 4 to 8 people, because you have at least 4 people that are flying the 4 planes. Now all 4 of those could have flight instructors, so you have 4 to 8 people that are doing this. A lot of times when you're practicing your takeoffs and landings, you have an instructor there and they're saying like, oh no, you need to do this, add more power, take out power, whatever, stop going upside down, Kelsey, whatever they want to say to you. But you have that going on, and so they're all listening to this pilot. Now, when I was doing flight school and I was in Vegas, I was doing, well, I did part of it out there in Henderson. That is a population about the same as Madison, about 300,000. And I always felt like an annoyance. Like I'm up there doing this and I'm kind of in the way and I don't really know what I'm doing. And I felt that like kind of like I'm annoying these other people. But this controller wasn't going to let these pilots get away with it. And he says this.
Maybe 2139, you could have told Mason about 10 minutes ago, right? We got 4 in the pattern. It happened 5 minutes ago. Now you tell me 1 minute ago you have 2 minutes before you time out. Unacceptable. Touch and goes going to last 20 more seconds and then you can go.
And there obviously was not a massive taxi to get to the runway. You can see these are the gates over here and this is the distance that they have to cover. So if the pilot left with that little amount of margin of their min fuel number and their block number, the really only person that he can blame is himself, because he shouldn't have left with that tight of numbers. Very short taxi, probably a short flight. I doubt that he was at his max takeoff weight, which sometimes happens to me. This situation that they're in where they're very tight on their numbers, that does happen to me sometimes. We're going to be at just under 1 million pounds, or we got the plane loaded up with as much freight as it can take, and then our fuel is just at the very minimum that safely gets us to our alternate, and we are right within a few 100 pounds of being at the very max our plane can be. They can't give us some extra gas, so if the taxi does take too long, then we have a problem. We have to go back to the gate. So it's a delicate balance in that situation, but we're talking in that situation, we're talking about close to 1 million pounds, maybe a 10-hour flight, and a cargo plane, which is typically right at a lot of times max takeoff weight, because airlines that fly cargo make their money based off of the weight of the things that they're moving. With passenger planes, it's a little bit different. And on a short flight, like wherever they're coming out of Madison, Wisconsin, wherever they're going, I'm pretty sure they wasn't going to like Charles de Gaulle in Paris. So I'm sure they had some room to take some extra fuel. I don't know Americans' policy for pilots about adding extra fuel. Some airlines make you call and do some things, but either way, there was plenty of time to make it over there, and it shouldn't have been that tight for talking 5 minutes. So when this pilot says something like this,
Really? Come on, this is a commercial airport, not a touch-and-go field.
he's honestly just being an because these pilots are there doing what they need to do to get their ratings. Now, it could just be that they want to get their private pilot license. It could just be that they want to do a demo flight, do one flight in the air and see what it's like being in a small plane. You saw the flight I did with Stella. Maybe it was somebody like that. They were freaking out, and they're going to hear this pilot screaming with air traffic control and all annoyed about everything. This pilot's basically saying, everybody else is less important than me. I want to do me. Screw everybody else. And that's honestly a terrible example to be setting, and it honestly irritates me when people do that. Just the other day, I was flying into Miami. There was a plane that was in front of us. It was like an Airbus A320. Now, when I cruise on my plane, we do it in percentages of the speed of sound, so the Mach. Now, we're cruising at like 0.85, so we're doing 85% the speed of sound. That's what we were doing. There was an Airbus ahead of us and below us that they were doing 0.78, so 78% of the speed of sound. And the controller said to us, hey, if you guys want to slow down, you're overtaking that plane ahead of you. Now, I didn't say, oh, there's two-engine Airbus A320, they don't know what's going on, or nothing like that. But I did make the recommendation. I said, if you want, I can go faster. And the controller said, oh, okay, great, yeah, go fast. So we just turned it up and we started going even faster. So we were able to fly over the top of them. And that's just, hey, I want to get to my destination. I'll give you something else that I can do, because my plane, a 7.4, can fly a lot faster than an Airbus. And we had a bunch of extra gas, and we had less payload than we originally thought, so we had been saving fuel throughout the whole flight. So we had talked about this situation because we could see the plane there. We were getting close to the arrival. So there are ways that you can get what you want without making other people feel less, which is what this pilot did. I think it's totally out of line. Something that I always try to remind myself is, don't forget where you came from. Someone sent me this audio of the captain telling the first officer how to talk on the radio, and honestly, it's just embarrassing.
Citation 730 Golf Yankee, contact Fort Worth Center 126.72. Have a good one.
126.72. 730 Golf Yankee. Good day.
See you.
Regional approach, citation 730 Golf Yankee. 10,000 for 9,000.
730 Golf Yankee approach, set to maintain 6,000.
Then maintain 6,000. 0 Golf Yankee.
November 0 Golf Yankee, advise when you have a mic.
We have Mike 0 Golf Yankee.
0 Golf Yankee, descend to maintain 4,000, contact approach 123.9er.
4,000. 123.9er. 0 Golf Yankee. Left tower. 730 Golf Yankee. Visual 13 left.
November 730 Golf Yankee, left tower, wind 170 at 9er, runway 13 left, clear to land.
Clear to land 13 left. 730 Golf Yankee.
That's horrible. November 0 Golf Yankee, street parking.
Vision 0 Golf Yankee.
November 0 Golf Yankee, you can turn left at Alpha 2, taxi Alpha to business jet, and you guys have a great day. You made my day today.
Alpha 2. Alpha to business jet. 0 Golf Yankee.
I mean, come on, 10,000 for 9,000?
10,000 for 9,000.
About 4 years ago, I made a video about making proper air traffic control calls and using proper phraseology. 10,000 for 9,000 is not in what I was explaining. That was explaining exactly the opposite of that. Now, clearly this pilot was busy with their school schedule or doing something else, and granted, I was new at YouTube at that time. It was kind of a terrible video.
JFK departure, Boeing 1, 8,400, climbing to 9,000. Boeing 1, JFK departure, you're climbing to flight level 290.
To make matters worse, you could actually hear the captain giving this first officer the instructions of how to say it wrong.
Citation 730 Golf Yankee. 10,000 for 9,000.
Now, how is that first officer going to ever become a competent first officer flying internationally when the captains are teaching her bad phraseology? I mean, it's just terrible. But at the end of the day, every pilot has to take their own responsibility regardless of what they're being told from their captain. That pilot could have just said, no, that's not the proper phraseology. It's 10,000 descending 9,000. That's how you say it, Captain. And of course, what does ATC say about this terrible phraseology?
That's horrible.
And I know what you're thinking. Kelsey's just jealous because when he's talking on the radio, nobody says things like that about him. And And that is true. And I suspect this first officer is a relatively low time first officer, pilot maybe just building their flight time. But if you've heard some of my other air traffic control versus pilots, they actually sound a lot more confident than some actual pilots.
I'm heading to Brooksville, K Bravo, Kilo, Victor.
My suspicion is that this captain is actually paying the first officer probably in food and shelter, which is pretty similar to what I was making when I first started. Actually, I was probably making less than food or shelter because I was getting usually, in some cases, $40 for an entire day's work because I would fly somewhere, sit there for hours and hours and hours, and you were only getting paid for the hours that your plane is flying. So there was days, I think I was making like $40 a day and getting up at like 4:30 in the morning and shoveling the snow away from my car so I could drive it in. Anyways, things have really changed in the last couple of years, but my guess is that this first officer sounds like they're probably just getting paid in food and shelter. Jokes aside, the person working this radio is killing it. They sound a lot more confident than I did probably in flight school. Another year or two, and if they do decide to become a pilot, they are going to get over that hurdle that a lot of people have, which is the fear of talking on the radio. Why is that such a fear? I don't know. I had it too. I didn't want to sound stupid and have everybody laughing at me. But this pilot is honestly doing a great job, and I think it's really cool. And Captain Dad, if you just stop teaching them bad things like 10 for 9 and 8,000 climbing up to 12,000, and just say 10,000 descending 9,000 or 8,000 climbing 12,000 or things like that, it's going to make their job a lot easier if they ever decide they want to fly international. I look forward to hearing from you. Until then, keep the blue side up.